Hi, what's up everyone? So here's a small little funny story. Right now it's New Year's Eve, it's about 2 hours before 2019, and to be completely honest, this is the same day where I recorded my worst movies of the year, but I changed my shirt to try to trick you into thinking it wasn't that date. But anyway, guess I might as well just be upfront and honest with you. And also, like 2018 and 2017 have been both good movie and book years for me. I said it on my movie videos, but there were very few movies and books that I hated. So I guess I might as well, I'm gonna say that again when I do my worst video. But for now, let's jump into the other flip of the coin, the best of the year. And I'm very stoked. This was once again a terrific year. I found so many new favorites, so many new classics that future classics. And so without further ado, I'd say we just get started and get the party rolling. So starting off this list is The Land of Stories, The Wishing Spell by the one and only Chris Colfer. I decided to read this after his other two books that I'd read, Struck by Lightning and Stranger Than Fanfiction, broke my heart numerous times, and then I found out that he wrote something for kids. In fact, there are 6 books in the series now, as far as I know. And something I really like about this children's book is the two main characters are put through actually quite some disasters and quite some scary moments, but Chris Colfer manages to never take it way too seriously, so that we can still have fun with the fact that these two ordinary kids who are actually going through a very hard time on their birthday have now realized that all of their grandmother's fairy tales are real and wild and alive for them to witness. The Land of Stories, The Wishing Spell manages to craft a universe of its own with all of these fairy tale creatures. It's a non-stop thrill ride, and trying to collect all of these different items from all of these legendary characters to try to craft one spell, it really is an interesting race against time, and actually a race against the witch. Just a lot of fun. And now taking the number 9 spot is Wildcard by Murray Liu, which is the sequel to Warcross. I'd heard that a few reviews said this one wasn't quite as good as the other one, and I admit maybe it's just a little less down, but still more than enough to earn the same spot on this list as Warcross was on my last list. Something that I love about this duology is how it's filled with science fiction and technology, but how the politics and the universe really don't feel far-fetched. They feel like everything that's happening would happen in real life one way or another. And this follows it up with so many brand new ideas I could have never dreamed. Even though all of the gaming takes a bit of a backseat because it focuses a little bit more on the underworld of Warcross, there are several very shocking moments, and I think it was a very fitting companion to the book that I ended up loving. Now taking the number 8 spot is a book called Exo by Fonda Lee, kind of like Exoskeleton. The sequel, Crossfire, had came out this year, and I really wanted to get to it. I just couldn't find the time with all of the more anticipated releases. But I will say that I guess Crossfire wasn't as anticipated on my list because I had more than enough fun reading Exo. At first I thought it would be a conventional hostage story before I thought it was just going to be a conventional cop story. But really, it really questions the idea of pride, kind of like the Vietnam War and the events that take place in the post. It talks about the old motto, the whatever doesn't negotiate with terrorists, but that sometimes you just have to for the greater good of humanity. I also like that in this book it's sort of like Reboot by Amy Tintera, in that the protagonist is at first a little bit heartless, but then ends up allowing himself, in this case himself, not herself, to learn more about this world that he thought for his entire life was just very narrow-minded, as he was. I really like books that manage to show progress in how a person is feeling. A very good coming-of-age thriller, and a very brutal coming-of-age thriller at that, too. This world really does feel like it has a lot of slums and a lot of corruption and a lot of fear in the world. And I honestly now, the more I talk about it, can't wait to read Crossfire. Plus, I really love this Donovan. And taking the number 7 spot, we have the newest Ember in the Ashes book, A Reaper at the Gates by Saba Tahir. All 3 of these books I love equally. They are filled with so many cataclysms and so many different points of view, but still manage to intertwine perfectly, like Avengers Infinity War, only much better. The Commandant is still as cruel as ever, and the final fight in this book is the biggest ever of the series, and maybe one of the biggest and most terrifying that I might have ever read before. Just like the other 2, this book does not shy away from rape and unplanned pregnancies and brutal torture and killings just for being someone different from the superior. And I would say that I'm just really excited for the 4th one. I'm sure that the 4th one's going to be as much of a knockout as this one was. And taking the number 6 spot is none other than A Map of Days by Ransom Riggs, the 4th Miss Peregrine book. And let's just say that I was terrified to start reading this because the ending to the last book, Library of Souls, was in my opinion perfect, and I was so worried this would spoil my number 1 favorite trilogy in the whole world. And I'll say this, as of this moment, it's really not my most favorite Miss Peregrine book, but I think that that is also because now I'm gonna have to wait a few years for the others, and I didn't have to wait a few years for the others. I started reading the Miss Peregrine series in just 2016, so all of the books were already out, so there wasn't that same feeling of dread of having to wait. And the cliffhanger in this is sensational, and also, I'd say that this is definitely the most heartbreaking Miss Peregrine book. I at first thought that the most dreadful one is when we come to a realization that Jacob's grandfather might have survived if Jacob hadn't been curious enough to come follow him. But then some of these characters really get disowned and then some of these characters end up getting disowned in a very brutal way. It really made me angry, and I am now stoked to find out what Ransom Riggs does with the next 2 books in the series. I like that this book also touches on how when world leaders end up very used to their privilege, or basically when anyone is used to their privilege, they end up very obnoxious and feeling like they're the only ones that can be right. And I think the one thing that I felt wrong with it is Miss Peregrine ends up really angry at her children, but she seems to have kind of forgotten that they really risked their lives and managed to save her from her brother Bentham and that evil call. But I guess that in a way, all of this is sort of the point, because we get to go along with that feeling. It's true that An Ember in the Ashes has some very brutal action, but I'd say that this book alone has more heartbreaking moments than all 3 of those books put together. It's definitely the most heartbreaking Miss Peregrine book yet. And coming up next, we have none other than the conclusion of the Illumini Files series, Obsidian. This is just an incredible book trilogy, and one of these days I'm going to reread it and I'm going to have the time of my life doing so. Though Obsidian definitely has one of the toughest chapters to read ever. In fact, there's a warning that says it's going to be very tough to read, and it really, really is. So something I wasn't the biggest fan of in Gemina, the second book of the Illumini Files, was kind of the exclusion of the previous characters. I still loved it though, even actually more than the first one. And finally, in this book, we get to see all of them clash together for the big final fight. I actually had to spend some very agonizing months waiting for this. And I'd say my favorite part of this novel is that this new protagonist named Asha Grant, she is depicted as the most ordinary of the heroes, and actually as a result the most brave in one particular circumstance. She ends up doing very regular things as just like basically a pharmacy intern and not a big hacker or the son of a big military sergeant. But she really ends up trying her best and doing some amazing things, some very inspirational things. It's definitely my most favorite of the trilogy. Next on my list is A Poison, Dark and Drowning, the second book in the Kingdom on Fire series by Jessica Cluess. I'd say that out of all the books I've read this year, this was definitely the easiest to get through. The pages are just devoured one by one, and just like the original, all of the amazing monsters and the prophecies and the creatures and the settings, like, they're all really top-notch. And I like twist-ups about how how the chosen one might not really be the chosen one. It also has a nice little simplicity that makes it just completely undemanding. I soared through it when I was in a reading slump, which is why I gave it a 4-star out of 4. I think that the third book is called A Sorrow, Fierce and Falling. Yeah, I can tell that that one is definitely going to be huge. I also liked that that it picks back up from this one character, this very interesting character named Blackwood. In the first book, he really had an attitude towards Henrietta Howell, but now he feels like he loves her, even though she has a longtime crush on her best friend, Rook. And I like that he does end up really sensitive toward all of this, and thinks about how far he has come as well as Henrietta. Basically, I thought that he would end up being someone we would want to go away for the entire trilogy when I first met him, but he actually ends up being one of my most favorite because he's one of the most intricate. All of these great characters really do end up carrying this series very nicely. And taking the number 3 spot is definitely going to be my most political read, even though actually all of these next ones are very political. But the reason I say this one tops it is because it's What Happened by Hillary Rodham Clinton. It was my first 4-star out of 4 of 2018. I know this was released in 2017. I really wish it was released this year, but you know what? That doesn't affect my experience of actually reading it. You see, I pretty much never read nonfiction books. I just look at all of them and I imagine that they're just completely dry and just fact-based and just demand that I know every single thing about them and memorize every detail as best as I can. It would feel like homework. But I decided after reading a few snippets of this book in the bookstore that it would be worth checking out, because I really do not to this day understand why Hillary Clinton is so hated. And it pains me to see all of these people that hate on her so much that some people are saying if she ran for presidency again, then it would be a surefire win for Donald Trump because she's hated even more. But I put this book this way. This puts every single thing that might have ended up a controversy from her campaign and ends up just squishing the controversy down in one swoop. And if there was anything she wasn't able to prove, then you can feel like she is telling the complete truth with this book. The attitude that she gives seems 100% honest, and I love the chapter that she gave just entirely to the Flint water crisis and just how ridiculous that email controversy was, how unfair things ended up being for her. I felt the same anger as I did when I found out that she lost. I was really looking forward to having her as president. I felt like not only would her policies be great, but they would be inspirational towards girls everywhere. So, but anyway, she was able to write this book, and while I would prefer this book not have existed, it's still a pretty good read. Now, taking the number 2 spot is a Harper teen book that, kind of like No One Else Can Have You by Kathleen Hale, seemed to be misjudged from the get-go, and I just felt I had to see what all the fuss was about. You see, this book was labeled as a white savior narrative sort of book, but a lot of people were rating it 1 star out of 5 on Goodreads before they even gave it a chance, so I went into it, but I still kind of expected to dislike it, but actually, I ended up loving it. Number 2 is American Heart by Laura Moriarty, a story of a United States where there are now Muslim internment camps in Nevada, and the excuse is Muslims are hated so much that it would not only be safer for the world if there weren't any Muslims around the US, but it would be safer for the Muslims too because no one would attack them in these internment camps. But this story is just about this one particular American girl whose innocent angel of a little brother ends up coming across a wrongfully accused Muslim fugitive. And our protagonist, Sarah Mary Williams, which rhymes with Huckleberry Finn, the first name, not the last name, reluctantly agrees to try to smuggle her into Canada. And I have to say that this is, I'd say, the perfect definition of an adventure novel. It's very similar to, I'd say, Mosquitoland by David Arnold, and I enjoyed that book, but I don't think it goes to any of the heights that this book does. A story about 2 hitchhikers might sound a little bit boring, But the truth is, because we don't know what's going on in these hitchhikers' heads, and that they might recognize the Muslim Sadat from the news, we never know what's really coming next, like, at all. And we hear about all these different people's motivations, and also being inside Sarah Mary's mind is just a complete treat, and a very different treat at that. She is kind of like uneducated but also been abused by her school, her mom that ditched them with her Aunt Jenny, and the ghost of her father. Let's just say that I ended up caring about Sarah Mary and Sadaf to the point where I felt I would go into a fit if anything bad happened to them. And also, Sarah Mary's voice kind of sounds like she watches Fox News for a living. And she sounds like she has so many personal problems that all this Muslim stuff she's perfectly fine with. So it's very nice to read about her cynical mind. It's a very refreshing change of pace. And, well, I am very sorry to Laura Moriarty that so many people seem to have missed the point. They're really missing out on one of the best in quite a while. So it's kind of funny about these two books. They are so similar to one another that the back of the newest one says that it is a book that would be proper alongside the other number one. Well, you're damn right. Taking the number one spot is a tie between Anger is a Gift by Mark Oshiro and The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. Both of these stories are about a black kid in a very prejudiced world. Let me put it this way. I'd say a good book has a moment where you walk out away from the book after you put it down and you think back to it. You think about how feeling that moment was pretty awesome and pretty different. These books each have about 20 of those moments. And after reading these two books, I don't think anyone will ever stereotype an African American family ever again. These families are torn apart, but they manage to patch themselves back together again with their love and understanding. For starters, Anger is a Gift is one that definitely has a lot more fighting, and I'd say maybe the same amount of abuse, but that's not to say that it's superior to The Hate You Give, not by a long shot. After I read this, I knew that it would be number one, and it would take a very, very, very amazing book to top it, and it never did. What makes The Hate You Give different from Anger is a Gift is how terrified the main character is to go against the corrupt police system after her best friend was shot. I felt that Too Conventional are books that immediately say we have to rebel. The Hate You Give to go against people in power. And I love the progress it shows as the protagonist, Starkheart, be in conflict with what exactly is the right thing to do if she should protect her family from the drug lord that could do away with her and the rest of her family. And I'll never forget the complete acronym. Thug Life, The Hate You Give Little Infants Fucks Everybody. It really, really does. And you know what? This isn't the best ending in the world. But I could see that there was a bit of a point to that. And I think that if it had a better ending, then it would have been maybe less thought-provoking, so all the better. And Anger is a Gift indeed, and so is this book. This book is bloodthirsty. It is so inspirational about how to fight back. I see in communities people say that if someone is angry, then they're not okay in the head and that they need to calm down or else they shouldn't be taken seriously. Anger is a Gift spits in their face as effectively as ever. And you know something? There are some moments in life where maybe it is better to calm down before starting anything, but the situations that these characters go through can probably make you feel, in certain instances, yeah, maybe I had it easy. Maybe that wasn't worth getting too petty and worked up about. Because the things that they go through in Anger is a Gift are just horrifying. You can't imagine that this could be nonfiction, but it just really, like The Hate You Give, has a real feel to it. I gave the movie of The Hate You Give my number 3 spot in my top 10 movies of the year. I said that Angie Thomas was inspired to write that book after the shooting of Oscar Grant. So really, both of these books are really grounded in reality. That's a very terrifying thought, but that's why they're both number one, and I'm gonna keep these on my bookshelf together for as long as can be. So there you have it. Those are my top 10 or top 11 books of the year, and now it's time to charge my camera battery before I get into the worst books of the year. So bye-bye, thanks for watching again.